All right, in this short video, we're going to start to unpack the PPP. We're first going to focus on how is the loan amount determined and what is the forgiveness amount based off of. These are two separate items, and oftentimes it can be confusing when we're thinking about this loan. So we're going to talk about the determination of the loan amount, the application of the loan amount, the forgiveness of the loan amount, and how can that affect the timeline in terms of when you apply. So first, let's talk about what the PPP is. It is a SBA 7A loan. Similar to the EIDL loan that we talked about in a previous video, this is a structure that's been in place for a long time and has generally been designed to be repaid, but unlike the SBA B2 loan, the SBA 7A loan is originated by private lenders. The PPP provides some specific provisions related to COVID-19. So we're going to continue to utilize those SBA partner banks and lending institutions, but this is designed to be substantially forgiven. When we go in and we are applying for the loan amount, there is a specific calculation that we're going to be looking at based off of payroll cost. So the loan amount is based off of your average monthly payroll cost times 2.5, so 2.5 months of average payroll cost, plus any outstanding SBA 7B2 loans. On the payroll cost side of things, it's the salaries, it's the equivalent of salaries. It's going to be payment for vacation and sick time, it's allowance for dismissal, it's the required provisions for health insurance and health benefits. Also includes, importantly enough, retirement benefits that were funded over the prior 12 months, as well as payment of state and local taxes assessed. So if we are going through the process currently of taking that avoidance of paying on the payroll taxes that we talked about in some of the CARES Act literature that we sent out, when you apply SBA funds to your payroll staff, you need to turn that function back on. Also, the sum of payments of any compensation earned as income of a sole proprietor or independent contractor. So you as the owner and your associate can apply as well. However, that total cost is capped at $100,000 per individual. So that's the limitations on this aspect. No more than $100,000 per individual. In the law, in the act itself, it says compensation of an individual employee in excess of $100,000. That compensation first was read to say, okay, we can do the compensation, then apply the retirement benefits for the prior year. However, in the application, it goes back to the language of costs over $100,000. So as you're working with your SBA lender, make sure you have clarity for those who have been paid or have incurred payroll costs above $100,000. Does that all need to be shrunk down? Or are we able to assume $100,000 in compensation and then the addition of retirement funds and some of those other tertiary costs? Based off of the application, I don't believe that that's going to be the case. Also does not include qualified sick leave or family leave, which was subject to that Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So a couple of things that kind of start to bring that back down, but when we looked at that payroll cost aspect, that's a pretty liberal amount. So we look at that as an average monthly expenditure. So for existing practices, they talk about a 1-year period before the date on which the loan is made. I would assume that that is based off of when you are applying in that rolling 12 months. I've seen it interpreted though as though it was February 15th, 2020 and back a year. So again, you want to make sure that you're talking to your SBA lender and that you're taking an approach that you both agree upon. Now for startup practices, that monthly cost can actually be from the January 1st, 2020 to February 29th, 2020. So there is a provision for startup practices who were not in existence for an entire year. The PPP loan amount is that average monthly payroll cost, all the categories that we saw before, with those restrictions, multiplied by 2.5, plus any outstanding SBA 7B2 loans. The important 7B2 loan that we talked about in our first video is that EIDL grant. So it is something that we want to roll over and incorporate here into the PPP loan. Now, that's the loan amount. Let's talk about what we can use the loan for. So payroll costs, as defined by the Act, so that big long list of payroll costs that we can bring in, mortgage or rent payments, utilities, and debt obligations that you incurred prior to February 15th of 2020. So again, that allowable use now is over here: payroll costs, mortgage and or rent, utilities, and debt obligations. However, what is forgivable is going to be the payroll cost, the interest on the mortgage or the full of rent, utilities, which kind of spell out which is identified within the CARES Act, and that's the amount that's going to be forgivable. And the timeline for that forgiveness is an 8-week period beginning on the date of origination of the loan. So when you receive acceptance and origination of that loan, those payments for those specific costs are forgivable for 8 weeks. Also, last night the SBA provided guidance that at least 75% of the forgiven amount must be used for payroll. This can create a little bit of a timing challenge. I know a lot of people are hearing that they need to rush to the door to file for this. We'll talk about how many dollars are actually earmarked for this specific purpose in this specific loan. But if you take this loan out and 75% of that payroll cost is less than normal, less than average, it can be a significant throttling to the amount of loan forgiveness that you're going to receive. Now, again, let's talk about that timing. So on April 3rd, this coming Friday, is the start of the application window for the cover period of the PPP loans. The end of that application window is actually on June 30th, 2020. The loan forgiveness, as you can see here, can extend all the way to August 25th. Because if you've got a loan that originates exactly on that June 30th date, we still have 8 weeks thereafter. I've seen literature that talks about that it stops, that forgiveness period stops at June 30th. That's not how the law is written. It is 8-week period beginning on the date of the origination of a covered loan. And the definition of a covered loan is a loan that starts on June 30th or before. So who's eligible? Any business with under 500 employees. Includes sole props, includes S-corps, and there are a self-certification on the application that also ensures eligibility. Now, how many grants? Unlike the EIDL, unlike the EIDL loan, when we knew exactly what that grant provision was and we knew exactly what was out there from the SBA in terms of funding, we don't know what the average loan is going to be in this circumstance. We do know that there are $349 billion set aside to be forgiven. The loan is first come, first served, so there's a timely element to it. The Treasury has stated that it will seek additional funds, but there's nothing material at this time. This is something that we need to monitor. Ultimately, the closer that we're able to take this out in terms of ramping back up the practice, where we're actually going to incur the payroll cost that's going to be the basis of forgiveness, is going to give us the best financial benefit for using this loan. However, any amount that is not forgiven, the SBA last night then also identified that they are going to amortize that over a 2-year period, and the interest rate that they're going to assign is 0.5%. So even if the forgiveness amount is minimal, it still is a very good access to capital tool. Thank you very much for your time.